fiction. We're not sure if it's a novel or a memoir or an autobiography, and in some senses it's all of these things, because in a sense it's a work of metafiction, and this plays into one of the themes of the text, in the sense that he's looking at how stories can help, heal, and teach us things. The context of this was that O'Brien went to the Vietnam War in 1969. He did his tour of duty. And the things they carried wasn't published until 1990. So there's a 21-year gap there. And in that gap we find a lot of the themes or the ideas within the story itself. Because the things they carried above all is about storytelling. Yes, it's based on memoir, on his war experiences, but more than anything, O'Brien is exploring the nature of stories. So, in terms of the genre, those stories, sometimes it's first-person narrative, sometimes it's metafictional, where he's talking directly to the reader, sometimes he's reflecting on the nature of stories themselves, and there's a blurring of truth and fiction here, okay? Because what he has actually done is O'Brien has created a fictional narrator called Tim O'Brien, who had pretty much the same experiences as him as well. That's important, really important, because what he's done is create a distance between himself and this narrator. And the narrator is the person who is telling stories that may have happened, may not have happened, and so he can look at how stories work in terms of teaching us and helping us heal, especially from the stories, the horrors of war. So that if we're thinking about in terms of the main themes of the text, obviously storytelling is, and its ability to teach, help, heal us is probably the number one thing. But also there's this idea of trauma and how, as a war veteran and as a soldier, O'Brien experienced, the real O'Brien experienced some horrible things in war, and it's taken him years to get over this. So in a sense, our second main theme there is sort of coping with trauma, and it's combined with the first theme in the sense that he's using stories to help him cope with that trauma. The third one is memory, and how traumatic memories will go around and around in the head and just keep going, and it's how do you deal with those memories? Okay. Everything in the novel is built around those things, around those points. Excuse me. For example, this passage comes from the last chapter, The Lives of the Dead. Okay. And it's structured in a sense that it starts out as a piece of, if you like, metafiction, where he's discussing the nature of stories, and then he leads into a story to give an example, if you like. So the tone of the piece begins as reflective or explanatory. For example, on line 1, but this too is true, story can save us. So this sounds very much like a reflective essay that you might see in the New Yorker or something. I'm 43 years old and a writer now, and even still, right here, I keep dreaming when you're alive. We've heard at least two of those phrases already before. There is a great deal of repetition in this novel, in this work of fiction. Part of that is to show how the memory works, and these things keep appearing again and again and again in his mind, and he's writing them out. He's writing them constantly. Ted Lavender appears many times. Kiowa's death appears many times. Kurt Lavender from line 3, excuse me, and the man I killed on line, there's a dodgy line there, line 5. The deaths of those fictional characters have all been mentioned at least half a dozen times each. And that repetition feeds into this idea that his memory is something that is troubling him a great deal, and it's through stories that he's trying to ease himself out of those troubles. Excuse me. looking at this passage in a little more detail, the slim young man I killed, all of those things up to that line have been mentioned before. And then a new one. And an old man sprawled beside a pig pen, and several others whose bodies are once lifted and dumped into a truck. That line there, those bodies dumped into a truck, that's the only time we hear about that. Okay. And it's my sense that that's actually true. Whereas the other characters there, Ted Lavender and Kurt Lemon, definitely are fictional characters. And he's using stories to show how the effects of trauma can destroy and help heal a person. But the bodies he once lifted into a truck, and they're left unnamed as well. It's also to point out the fact that it's a motif. There are plenty of bodies in this work of fiction. Excuse me. They're all dead, but in a story which is a kind of dream, the dead sometimes smile and sit up and return to the world. Excuse me. He's still in a reflective tone here, discussing the nature of stories and how he's using them. And we've seen several times how Ted Lavender, in a sense, is almost reborn through someone mimicking his voice. Kurt Lemon is mentioned after he's died as well. Excuse me. Line 9, start here. This sounds like an explanation. A body without a name. Again, another body. He talks at some other point where he could not look at the bodies, and so much of the stories in this, in the things they carry, have graphic imagery, and that graphic imagery is important because it shows the narrator looking at what he couldn't look at in the war. So that imagery, which we'll see some of shortly, is very important, not just in terms of giving the reader a sense of being there, but it's also a sense of the writer working their way through the problem. He describes how they approached a filthy little village. There's a little bit of sniper fire, and then Jimmy Cross got on the radio and ordered up an airstrike. When it ended, we formed a loose line from a piece through the village. It was all wreckage, I remember, burnt straw. The place was deserted, no people, no animals. And the only confirmed kill was an old man who lay face up near a pig pen in the centre of the village. His right arm was gone. Again, that sort of fairly graphic imagery there. At his face are already many flies and gnats. Okay, a nameless body. Then each of the main the characters here go over and shake the man's hand. How do you do? Rat Carly bent over the corpse. Give me 5. Please just punch, said Henry Collins. Okay. This is strange. They're going over and they're talking to a dead man. Okay. But it's not the first time we've seen that in this story. In this work of fiction. Okay. They are bringing the dead back to life in their own way. Okay. As the narrator himself does. Okay, with Linda in the story. He brings Linda back to life and they sit up and have a conversation. But the soldiers themselves are bringing the dead back to life. Now, confronting death in all its immediacy in war must be a terrible thing to do, and the soldiers really struggle to deal with it. Boom, down, like cement, says Kiowa early on in the things they cover. It's something it's almost impossible to understand. So in a sense, what they are doing, these characters are bringing this old man back to life. Excuse me. They're giving him an afterlife. If you like. 9 minutes. And they use very casual language and so forth, as if to suggest that he's still alive. Give me 5. He's asking for a response. And this is we see this quite a lot in the things they carry, where Ted Lavender is brought back to life in a way through the characters mimicking his voice when they're smoking his dope, and with Linda as well, when he dreams her alive, which he wakes up in excuse me. But he says on line 30, the narrator says, I was brand new to the war. It was my 4th day. I hadn't yet developed a sense of humour. Right away, as if I'd swallowed something, I felt a moist sickness rise up in my throat. Okay. We have some more imagery there. This one's fairly straightforward in the sense that it's giving us a sense of the horror that he's feeling at this dead body. And it also juxtaposes or contrasts with the other soldiers who seem completely unperturbed by the fact that there's a dead body. In fact, they quite enjoy it, whereas he is quite sick of it. And this can show us something about the dehumanising effects of war overall. Towards the end, Dave Jensen says, show a little respect for your elders. No way, replies the narrator. Maybe it's too real for you. That's right, I said, way too real. That word real is important in this passage as well. And not just this passage, but the whole work of fiction. What is real in this is a good question, because much of what it is fictional. O'Brien blurs the boundaries between fact and fiction, so it's trying to get to what the real truth is. And he says back in How to Tell a True War Story that the real truth to him is an emotional truth. And it's that storytelling must get to that emotional core, because any other ways is not going, people are not going to understand the horrors of war. And so the word real here has it brings the reader up to a full stop in a sense, because all the way through O'Brien has been blurring the boundaries. He's saying one thing and then denying it, and what's real and what's not real. Okay. And so, but that idea of death is very, very real in itself. But whether this story actually happened, we don't know, because the narrator is unreliable. Okay. And so that word real affects the reader by suggesting that, okay, stop it, making them think, okay, what's real? What is the story real? Is the event that it actually happened? Or is the fact that he felt sick the most important real element in his text? So overall, I probably better finish about time before I ask myself some questions here. This passage is important to the text as a whole, because again it's the narrator exploring the importance of stories and how the stories are helping him work his way through the horrors of war and through the depth of the experience. Through the use of imagery, through this use of the tone, the reflective and then the explanatory tone, through the imagery, through the casual dialogue, and through this notion of what's real, he gets the reader to be thinking in terms of what stories mean to us. All right. 13.5 minutes. Now, what didn't I do then? I only got to it at the end, only mentioning the effect on the reader.
Connect the text to the theme.
Sorry?
Connect the text to the theme.
I thought I did that all right. But the things I carried is quite difficult, okay? And because it's that tone, and there's obviously not, just the metaphors or and so forth scattered throughout, like in Macbeth, as you can pick up with ease. I think that tone is important. Okay, whatever passage you get, you have to work with that. And I might probably should have said something about how this reflective tone affects the reader by getting them to reflect as well. And by using sort of the explanation, start here, that statement there, how does that affect the reader? Okay, we've had a change of tone, but we're now going to get an explanation for this. Okay. So, I think I probably did all right, but probably need a little more explanation of how those literary devices, tone, imagery affect the reader.